Hi, everyone. So excited to be here again, especially with my good pals, Jason and Dave. If you've been watching Thursdays, you can't miss Jason and Dave since we've been doing so many. Today's show is focused around is focused around empowerment, and it does kind of fit with the hour of empower. So, with that said, we should have another guest coming, Charles Caldwell. I'll keep you posted on that. And in the meantime, why don't we get started with, well, here's Charles, by the way. Uh, oh, Charles, how are you? Right on the dot.
I'm well. How are you? Hi,
Doing,
everybody.
doing
Hey, Charles.
great. I've been seeing all your posts and very excited by all the diversification of your time and interest. I saw you were
Yeah.
at some neuro something or other.
Yeah, the Neuro Leadership Institute in Singapore earlier this week.
Well, that's great. And I know that you've had a show with Jason. I don't know as if you had a show with Dave. So this is a chance for all of
No.
us to get together.
Yep.
Uh, Dave, why don't you finish what you were saying?
Oh, all right. Hi, everybody. It's great to see everybody, and nice to meet you, Charles. Been to
Hi.
Hong Kong, very nice city. Been a long time since I've been there, though, but I'm sure it's changed quite a bit.
It's time to come back.
We'll talk about that separately. It's great to be here. Nothing really new going on in my life here, but and excited to talk to Charles and everybody about the word empower. You know, as a Navy leader, it was a word that came across my mind many times of how do I ensure that my people have the right lessons and authorities to do what they need to get things done, empowering them, if you will, to do so and make sure they're confident, able, have the right tools and what they need to do or what they need to do what they have to do. So I'll just leave it there to start.
Well, sounds good. Jason, your turn.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. So this morning I looked up the definition of empower. I mean, we all work in it, we live in it, and this is the hour of empower. But to make someone stronger and more confident, especially in controlling their life and claiming their rights, and that's what I do with clients. Funny enough, one of my writings is I write a superhero story, about 1,000 words an episode. I have 4 episodes now, and the superhero is the empowerer. It's about giving people that strength within. And I think that's the key to all of this, is that we have that light within us. Sometimes we just need something external to let us be able to see that light.
Makes sense to me. A great start. And with that, we'll turn it over to our good friend Charles Caldwell in Hong Kong. And Charles has quite a background and is doing some very empowering things for I know the largest English-speaking school system in Hong Kong. So, Charles, take it away.
Yeah, I'm actually no longer with that organization. Just left them about a month ago and out doing some new things. And so quite keen to join the discussion about empowerment today. I think that's a really important word and important for us to maintain, empowering vibes only.
Well, sounds great. Now it's back to me. So with that said, empowerment has always been an important element of my success. Not only empowering others, but allowing yourself to empower yourself, to reach higher than you normally would have. And I think it's a matter of trust, because it's hard to empower people if there's not a trust factor, because there's always that thought, is there something behind this? When you have to question intention, you have to question the subject of intention. And trust is something that's hard to build, but easy to lose. But once you have it, you've got some pretty good power momentum going in your favor and everybody else's. So Dave, back to you.
Yeah, I'll continue on that with trust. Is you have to know what your aim and goal is. What are you trying to accomplish? If you don't know what it is, where it is you're going, how can you tell someone to go with you or come with you or to go do something? Everything has to have an end purpose. And if you trust somebody to have that same vision with you, or you've led them to the point where they can believe in you, that's an empowerment of yourself, like you said. and allows you to let go of some of the not the responsibility, but the actions that need to be done to do so. And that's empowerment, letting go. So I've talked to a number of folks this past week, the last 2 weeks, of what we call the military load shedding. When a system gets too overwhelmed, it has to start shedding some of its load, and people just take on this, I have to do it all. I have to be involved. Well, if you're doing that, you're not training your people to grow themselves, to understand what it is that you do on their own terms, and how to get to where it is you want to take a company, an organization, yourself, whatever it is. If you're doing it all, then you're losing the bigger picture. And I just had this conversation with a partner business that I work with, and she gets into doing all things herself, and that just doesn't get anybody anywhere fast. So you have to empower your people, but you have to, one of the things she struggles with is, where is it do we want to go? Where is it we're looking to grow to? Do we have goals, aims, purpose? And without those things, people are just going through the daily routine, not really pushing to that aim goal, because she hasn't communicated it, if anything else.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Want to welcome Leslie Fowlers to the show. Leslie's a prodigious LinkedIn supporter and provider. Does Think and Grow Rich on Fridays. I've done probably 50 shows with Leslie, so we're old hands at this. And 4 boys and no girls. Well, you're here now, so it's now 4 boys and 1 girl. Welcome, Leslie, as always. Just a pleasure to know and to be able to collaborate with Leslie. With that said, we'll swing it right back to Jason.
Yeah, the trust is so important, and to speak to that trust, and also to Dave talking about sharing that the workload, so to speak. Something that I wrote the note down is about the unfair part of when you say you're empowering someone is if you give them responsibility but no authority. And empowering is about giving people authority. Where you're going to be like, well, do this, and then you micromanage them and you keep following up and you keep checking on them. That's not helping that person grow. That's just getting your tasks done. We talk about the difference between a manager and a leader. That's a manager, is you're just getting tasks done. You're not a leader growing and developing your people. So I think that's very important, is that as we empower people, we have to give them that authority to do what they want to do. And whether it's authority over themselves, so they can see that they have the ability to do whatever they want to do and what they need to do, or in a position, in a role, and say, no, this is, you own this, and I'll support you in any way I can, but here's the ball, run with it. And then you could let them take it to the next level.
Yeah, so true. And with that, I'll move it to Charles before I get into a tangent somewhere.
Yeah, I fully agree with what's been said so far. I think empowerment is really, it's definitely not micromanaging. Micromanaging is not fabulous. And it comes back to things I've talked about before about, traditional models of leadership talk about heroic leaders, and heroic leaders are really all about the leader being the hero and the people not being the hero. And we want to flip that around to a post-heroic model, which you're seeing more and more of in today's day and age, which is the leader is not the hero, but the people are the hero. The people are the heroes. And that's really what empowerment in my thinking is all about. And I also think that, empowerment is also about letting go of the past and embracing the future. So if you've got things that are holding you down from the past, then that's going to prevent you from being empowered. Even if you have a fantastic leader who's trying to encourage you and empower you, it's important to really have awareness about your past, because otherwise that's going to lock you down and prevent you from growing to the best possible person that you can be.
Great thoughts, everyone. I'll get back to Leslie real quick. Boomers and perhaps a Gen Xer, this is one-sided with a comical tilt or lilt. A leader allows people to have authority to fail and then let them learn. Also made you smile. You always make me smile, Leslie. You're one of the best. Leaders will have at least once completely surrendered to a leader so they know what following entails. And, you know, I think the other key thing of empowerment and leadership is duplicating through others, right? Allowing people to learn what you feel is important for them to take the next step, and then open that opportunity to them. Because for the group to move up, everybody has to move up. It's just too much push and pull if it's one person doing it all. Plus, it's not that exciting, you know, when it's always do what I say, not what I do. And that's where a little bit of distrust can seep into it. And the other thing is to look forward to empowerment, because what it is really building strength, self-strength, you know, pushing yourself to another level that you might not have, not based on motivation, but based on information and leadership. And they say leadership can be defined as being a person who has other people do things they couldn't or wouldn't have done without you. You know, so sometimes you're the leader, but you're not the best at anything. You know, there's people below you or next to you who can provide all kinds of quality input and value, but they need to be let loose. You know, Leslie does say it best here: when a leader allows people to have authority to fail and let them learn. More from Leslie: leaders will have at least once. Okay, we covered that. Empowerment is, for me, is inspiring others to feel important, so right. And all of a sudden, Leslie's figuring out it's 11:11. Thank you, Leslie. So with that, we're back to Dave.
Yeah, I'd like to go back a step. And it's funny that we've mentioned the word micromanagement a couple of times here. I saw a post this week on LinkedIn that said, it may be taboo, but micromanagement is necessary. At times is the only caveat I would put to that. I think it's frustrating for younger, and I'll say younger in the sense of new to an organization, people who don't know how things are run, or new to a leader, someone you're just starting to work for somebody and you haven't built that trust with them yet. So a leader may have to micromanage in the beginning to say, look, here's where we get, or how we do things here. And I want to see that you do these things. And as you start to be able to do things, the micromanagement should taper off while the trust builds. And that's where the empowerment comes, I think, is where the intersection of micromanagement on the decline crosses the trust on the incline, if you will. That's where the empowerment starts, because you're not micromanaging them any longer, but you've trusted them to take it on and do the work that you no longer have to. You've load shed, as I said earlier. You said, I don't have to do that anymore because I trust them, i.e. empowered them to do it on their own. And then there's a separate side to this too, in my mind, of these are the tasks that I want to get done, or I know have to be done, and I've done them in the past, and I've now empowered someone else to do them. But I'm also taking a side of how can we do things better or differently, and then saying, hey, I want you to try it because I've built this trust with you on the right side. This left side is going to say, go try something new, and I'm going to give you the authority and the responsibility to, you know, fail, if you will. Like Leslie says here, you know, we give them the authority to fail. Try something new. That's empowering because I've built trust. I can then let them do something on their own, but I'm always going to have their back and accept the responsibility if they fail.
Great point. Charles will add to that. With empowerment as a process of becoming stronger, more confident in one's ability, unknown for sure. Back to Jason.
Yeah, you know, to Dave's point, you definitely have to teach, train, and educate your people. You know, the person first. That's where it all starts with. Starts with awareness. That's what, even in my work on one-on-one with people and on their mental health, it's like, where are you at? You know, so you find out where this person is at that you're going to empower. Find out what they know and what they don't know, and then you teach them and you train them. You don't just release somebody. You know, I was in retail leadership for a lot of years, and one time we had an open store in the Bay Area, which is a challenging market, and they needed someone to take it over. And there was someone that had worked with me. He was an assistant manager, and he'd worked with me for a while, but he showed great promise. He wasn't there yet, but he showed great promise. Well, the powers that be said, no, we need to fill that store. We think he's ready. And I'm like, he's not ready. And they're like, nope, we think he's ready. You can watch over him, whatever. I was area manager at the time. I was running my own store and I was overseeing other stores, and they pay the bills. So we did it, and he failed miserably, unfortunately. They gave him responsibility, they gave him authority, but not the training. So he was at a spot where things changed in his life, and I tried to support him and I tried to help him, but it was too much. It was overwhelming. It was a store that was just in a tough market, and it was too much. And so you have to Dave's point, you have to be in there. You have to be supporting them through that journey. It's not about empowerment. It's not about, here's the keys to the car, go drive it. And it's a race car, and you've only driven a Metro, a Geo Metro, if you remember those cars before. It's like, wait a minute, that's not empowering me. That's actually disempowering me. So being aware of where a person's at, give them the tools they need, and then send them off. That's the most important part.
Perfect. Charles?
Absolutely. And another way that I've heard it described in the past is that leaders celebrate the successes of their teams. So when there's a success, there are great results, they celebrate the team. And when there are failures, they take the responsibility themselves. And that doesn't mean that they won't have side conversations with people about ways that things can be done better or differently to learn from failures. But it's a little bit like the old parenting adage that you praise publicly and criticize privately. That's a very, very powerful phrase. But I like the fact that well-being has been mentioned here, because I think that well-being is a big barrier right now to empowerment on the planet within the global workforce. I think there's still a lot of well-being issues that are out there. You look at all the statistics that are coming in from Gallup or from the medical insurance companies, and they're all talking about how serious a mental health crisis there is out there in the global workforce. And I've been really turning this over in my head lately. And I think that some of the events of the last 5 years, people are suffering a little bit from, let's say, moral injury, where they've seen things happen on the planet that they don't necessarily agree with. And it conflicts with their values, and that is impacting how much they're empowered. And as a result of that, you're having the Great Resignation and quiet, silent quitting and things like that are happening in the workforce. And the key thing for leaders and managers is to be able to get in there and have conversations with employees and with your teams to be able to dislodge some of that malaise that's creeping into the global workforce, to really enthuse people and inspire them, keep them focused on the vision, keep them focused on the direction that you're going in, what you're trying to accomplish as a team, as a group, depending on whatever organization that you're in.
Yeah, that is so true. And lifting others up on the shoulders of people that came before is so important. And you're right, Charles, there's so much pressure on putting people in their place or identifying their place instead of providing a channel or a lane for opportunity. And it's a process. It's not like Jason said, here, you're the boss now, take over. It's getting someone ready. The other key word that comes with empowerment beyond trust is safety. If you provide a safe environment where people feel comfortable bringing up their opinions, sharing maybe disagreements in a respectful way, and sometimes, if you say something, it goes against you and your situation. So you tend to stifle yourself. And, that just continues to grow within the organization, and everybody's looking good, but not being good. And eventually poor morality will seep through, because the leader's the one who has to be the example. It can't be, I can steal, but you can't, or I can lie, but it's okay for me and not you. Got a couple more comments. Leslie comes back with, thank you for not calling task goals. They could not be more distinct. And here we have our good friend Omar. Omar's just a wonderful gentleman. I don't know if Charles is familiar with him, but he's a great guy to know. He does shows all over the world. He travels. And he's also a tutor for young people as a profession. And I know that's, near and dear to Charles's heart. He has a show called Who Are They, or something of that nature. I've been on it a couple times. He also has Zoom Party, which he has a kids show. My grandson actually won on that program. So thank you. And also he's organizing a LinkedIn singing contest, of which I expect to be a judge because I certainly don't sing very well. Charles does add, empowerment is all about letting go of the past and embracing the future. I think I covered that. Maybe not. No, second one. So yeah, this is a fruitful opportunity for people to re-examine themselves and what they do and how they do it around others. I think Charles made a great point in that, it's the projection, in a sense, that really starts to seep into the team. And, you need to celebrate victories, and you need to make people feel worthwhile, that they have a purpose and they're valued, even though it might not be a major player. I found when I had businesses, some people who were on the floor or in the warehouse had more insights into what was going on than the people with all the forms and the charts and the reports. And that just gets you so boring. The other thing I'll say, with empowerment, is to keep it interesting and exciting. How many times you get people who are doing a great job and you call them into an hour meeting and you bore the hell out of them, and it's to be expected after a while, and you're actually disempowering people. And I guess it's also the freedom to talk, the freedom to act, the freedom to fail. Fail forward is a key element. Dave? Yeah,
I'd like to take a little bit away from empowerment, maybe a little bit, but come back to it eventually, I hope, is leadership. The last couple of weeks, a couple of times, I think I've said, I've brought up the ivory tower leadership that I just absolutely abhor, where people just sit up in their ivory tower and expect that the information will flow up to them and the people down below will just do what they're told. And as you were talking, Don, it occurred to me, I've never seen the entire movie, but I think it's Ford versus Ferrari with Matt Damon and how they overcame the Le Mans and beat Ferrari at that race. And there's a scene that I've seen on Facebook a couple of times where, Matt Damon's character, Tom Shelby from the Shelby Mustang fame, points out that, you've got this one red folder that has to go through 10 people to get to Mr. Ford. And then you don't know what happens to it afterwards, but there's just so many layers of bureaucracy to get to the senior leadership. And the counter to that was, in my career, I found the most empowering times I've had. I knew I could walk into the admiral or the colonel or the captain or the general's offices and say, boss, we've got a problem. I didn't usurp the chain of command. I told them I was going, but I had the responsibility to tell them the truth. I had the authority and the accountability to go forward and tell the senior leadership what's going on. I was empowered. And to your point, Charles, with the ivory, and where I'm bringing it to the ivory tower leadership is when you have so many people that don't see a leader or don't have access to the change that they think is possible because they've just been ignored at the lower levels, they feel disempowered, and then they get malaise, and then they silent quit, or they just walk out of the workforce altogether. So we have to look at our organizational structures as well. Is really where I think I'm going here. And leadership has to be true to itself and be able to get down and talk to people. Again, I abhor the ivory tower leadership. I watched one flag officer, 4-star admiral in charge of an entire Pacific region. Nobody could get to him without going through 5 people, or 3 to 5 people, just in his own office. That wasn't empowering. We felt like we were just going through the motions. So get out of your office, talk to people, be honest with people, to Charles's point, being honest with them is, hey, here's the situation. If a leader comes down and says, hey, don't worry, the company's doing great, we're not going to be laying anybody off, don't listen to those rumors, and then 5 minutes later he fires 10 people. Well, that's not trustworthy. So you've got to have the level of trust, and you have to get down and start getting to the root cause and get down to the situation with the people who are doing the work. If you're in your ivory tower, you failed.
Yeah, for sure. Leslie comes back with excellent point, Dave. Intersection where trust and micromanagement intersect. Charles has a great saying, leadership is not being the best, it's about making everyone else better. Yeah, and I think to that point, and I'll swing it back to Jason, is that what you give and what you invest is what you have a tendency to receive. And too many people want someone to do something in order for them to do something, and being proactive can go a long way. It's the people that get there a little bit earlier, stay a little bit late, practice a little bit more, and people recognize that. Little things make a difference over time. And, if you want more authority, if you want more power, and I guess empower is really a part of that, getting stronger and applying yourself, is taking responsibility yourself and being accountable. It's a lot easier when someone says, I made a mistake, but here's what I learned and here's what I'm going to do next. As opposed to, well, it wasn't that bad, and it was one in a million. And after a while, you're just like, there's no reason to tell that story because it doesn't benefit anybody. Jason?
Yeah, great points. And to Dave's point, the thing about empowerment is that the people think that the people are controlling, and they won't give away control. And to be empowered, you have to have that control. You have to have that ability. They're like, oh, well, you're overseeing this one piece of the puzzle and you're doing great. And it's like, but if you can't see how it fits into the big picture, you're not empowered. Once again, you're just a cog. You're just a taskmaster. You're just getting things done. And people can make you feel, it's like when they give you a title instead of a raise. It's like, well, I'm the custodial engineer. Okay, I guess that makes some difference somehow. But joking aside, it's so important that people are connected and feel that they have that control. That's true empowerment. I think so many times, whether it's the military or business, or sometimes in our family structures, people feel like, well, I'll give you a little piece of this puzzle, and this, and that'll just go away, kid. You bother me. It's like, no, truly let me be involved. And to Don's point, you have to be able to fail. You have to be able to misstep and then own it, and be able to come and say, have the wherewithal to say, you know what, this was the mistake, this is what happened, or to say, I don't know. You know what? I couldn't accomplish this, and I don't see where to go. And that's when that's empowering, when someone says, well, let me show you. Let me help you along the way. So it's just a little stumble. It's not a fail.
Yeah, absolutely. Charles?
Yeah, another way it's sometimes described is that information is control. And it does amaze me in today's day and world how people continue to hoard information and not let go of information, which is exactly what the two of you are talking about, right? You let go of information to empower people, and the worst thing that can happen is people find out later that actually you were hoarding information, and you've known about something for a couple of days or weeks or months, and you kind of get called out on that, which is unfortunate. But another way of describing, coming back to what David said, another way of describing, that way of getting out of the ivory tower is this concept of sense checking, which is another term that I've heard recently being bantered around, which is when information is flowing through an organization, particularly around an organization's direction, or to your point, Dave, about, there will or will not be layoffs, is that people actually take that information and they validate that information. If there's a project, if there's a certain strategy on how to get something done, You validate that information up and down the organization, and you test out the ideas, the plans to ensure that they're logical, that they're coherent, that they're reasonable. We've probably all heard of situations where leaders have said, this is the direction we want to go in, and then people lower down in the organization are saying, what? Why are we doing it that way? And sense checking is one of the ways that you can get out there and critically evaluate information to identify inconsistencies, gaps, or errors, or ways that something actually won't work. And if leaders are really good at encouraging sense checking, that's a fantastic way to empower people in an organization.
Great point. And the beauty of the show is it creates ideas and thoughts you wouldn't have had if it wasn't for the person before you or the people before you, because you can tee off of it. And what comes to mind is empowerment is much better or more achieved through involving people in the process, not after the process, right? If you're going to change the lunchroom hours, right? It's important to say, we're about ready to review this, love your input, and could you add something to it? As opposed to the meeting just took place, or you get a memo or an email, new change tomorrow, this is going to happen. And it's like, well, sometimes people shoot and then they aim. And it's too late afterwards to say, I didn't know that people are doing this at that time of day, and now there's a conflict. And a lot of people just go with the flow because they're used to it. And I think at a certain point, if you make people feel important, you're empowering them just by getting their opinion. You might have made your decision, but it's important to share it prior to implementing it, because someone says, well, they really cared what I had to say. They didn't follow it, but at least they gave me an opportunity. And when I shared something that was counter to what they were doing, I didn't catch any flack. And I think, how you treat people both ways, on the way up and the way down, how you can come up with corrective empowerment or supportive empowerment. And, to Dave's point, it's easy to give a title, but you can't spend your title, and you can't come home and say, hey, by the way, honey, they gave me a big job responsibility. And the next question, well, how much are they going to give you more? Well, they didn't bring that part up. So you do more for less and take on more responsibility. Some things that aren't logical, there's a reason why there should be some reinterpretation of it. And also the other big part of empowerment is a leader admits mistakes to the group. Who says, yeah, I made a policy last week, and by the way, it's not working out the way I hope. We're going to make a change. Mistakes aren't an issue as much as correct. How long does it take to see it, feel it, and experience it before you change it? And once you can be forgiven, I used to tell all my people, be at least as generous with me as I am with you. Take the thoughtfulness and the generosity and the concern, and allow me to make mistakes, because that lends itself to open communication. And when you start censoring yourself or restricting yourself, you're limiting what you can say, who you can say it, and becomes more a process than really an opportunity. Charles says, knowledge is power, but it's only powerful when shared, for sure. And also, empowerment is about giving people the freedom to make decisions, take risks, and learn from their experiences. So true. Dave.
Yeah, I'm going to build on Charles's quote there of knowledge is power, but it's only powerful when shared. And it just reminded me of a quick story when I was in the Navy. And I was the educational services officer. I was responsible for getting trainings and other things for the sailors in my command. And I was a very, very junior lieutenant, only been in the Navy for 4 years. I remember going to a department head meeting, and I said to the captain, I said, Captain, we got this problem here. I've been trying to get a hold of this particular lecturer. They said they're not available, or I haven't been able to get in touch with them, whatever it was. And there was a senior enlisted advisor. He's junior to me by rank, but senior to me by 15, 20 years of experience, or 20 more years of experience than my 4. But he pops right around with, well, Captain, that's a lie, because I just talked to that lecturer and he's available tomorrow. Well, what did that just do to me? It just said, no, I'm not empowered to do what I need to be done. He's got this information, this knowledge, and he's using it over me. And I came to find out that this particular Master Chief had worked for my father in 1982. Now we're talking 1999. And he didn't like my dad when he was a junior enlisted, so I must not be likable either. And he took that ability away from me to succeed. And he felt powerful. And he and I had a few words afterwards in his office, again, raising public, crap on him, if you will, pardon my language, in private. But, I think everybody heard me nonetheless. But it wasn't empowering. It just said, why am I here? If you're going to do all this work, why am I here? If you had given me that information, I could have told the captain, and we all look like heroes. Hey, the Master Chief just passed this to me, and I'd like to tell you, we've got the lecturer. We both look like heroes instead of you looking like an ass. Pardon again my French. It just doesn't. You have to share power. You have to share knowledge, and you will all grow together.
That's a great point, a great story, and hopefully we can all learn and be empowered by it. Jason?
I think that's so important. What Dave's talking about is that the intention has to be there. When you start getting into politics, when you start getting into what's in it for me, what's in it for you, it's what's in it for us. To Charles' point about leadership, it's about the team and it's about the people looking better. But when you have somebody that's using this, weaponizing empowerment, so to speak, that's the worst, because it takes something that's supposed to be positive and makes it a negative. And it's just that polarization just throws you off. So anyway, so it's just so true that we really need to know where we're coming from and what we're looking for. If it was truly about building the team, getting the things accomplished, then it's about what can we do and how can I support you in that? And then that becomes a group and a community, as I always talk about, and a community gets more done than just one person. So I'm kind of all over the place with this, but it just shook some things up. As Don always says, you're teeing off from that. I'm not teeing off, but I'm just trying to figure out there's so many great points, and it just takes this conversation in a different direction. But empowerment has to be pure and true. You have to really want that person to succeed for it to really succeed.
Absolutely. We've got Clement Tan here, a new name that I think Don is right about how leaders should admit mistakes to teams and to learn. Leslie had a 11:30, so it was great to have her with us today. And Charles comes back: when people are given freedom, they will surprise you with their creativity and resourcefulness unknown. Charles.
Yeah, actually, that Clement who's just left a comment for us, I'm going to do a small diversion here and just do a shout out to Clement. My kids years ago got me onto Snapchat. Then I stayed on Snapchat. They left. Then they got me into BeReal, and I stayed on BeReal, and they left. So I kept up BeReal, and I met. I've got BeReal friends all over the world, kind of like you guys, right, on LinkedIn. I've met you guys, but we've never actually met in person. And I hope someday I do have the privilege of being able to meet you in person. So Clement and I were BeReal friends, and I was in Singapore this past week attending a conference, and I saw him post a BeReal, and I said to him, hey, let's get together for a coffee or something like that. So we actually had a chance to meet each other for the first time face to face, which was really a great thing to do, and put a face to the name and be able to shake his hand and learn in person what he's up to in life. So I've been able to do that a couple of times. And as I said, I hope someday I'll be able to do that with you guys too. So shout out to Clement. We also connected on LinkedIn this past week. So thanks, Clement, for being here. Dave, your story about that situation in the military would be really, really frustrating. I feel for you on that. And I was actually about to share how I have a lot of respect for people in the military, because I know that one of the mantras of the military, and you can correct me if I get this wrong, is to give people the freedom to maneuver and the freedom to make decisions when they're, really, I don't know what the phrase would be, in the line of fire. And I think that training is really, really invaluable. But I'm sorry that you had to go through that situation. And Jason, what you were saying, I think that it is a huge topic, empowerment. But I think that what you were getting at is also the importance of authenticity, and really being authentic and with information, but also being vulnerable with information, being willing to let go of information and let go of certain situations, which will result in empowering other individuals.
Well, I think also to that point, and the points all of us have kind of discussed today, is people show insecurity when they can't or won't trust other people. Tony Robbins was quoted or had said, he gives away all his best stuff as soon as he has it. And there was someone who questioned him and say, well, aren't you afraid that they're going to use it? He said, well, be honest with you. It turns out about 98% of people never do. Right. So the fear that they're going to do something with what I learned takes away the credit of learning it. Someone who just gives you the answer without what happened to get to that is not empowering anybody. And the other thing is what you do to one, especially if you're in a team or organization, affects everybody, right? You may not have been the person around the table that got criticized in public, but you feel bad for the person. You feel less to the person who did that. And now what happened to them will probably start to happen to me one day. So how people talk about other people is how they're going to talk about you. How people treat other people is going to be how they probably treat you. So you're actually showing your hand by not showing your hand, or how you show your hand, right? Without full disclosure, there's too much mystery. And people would rather buy clues before they solve the puzzle than go out there and say, whoops, I should have waited a little bit more to figure this out. But again, it's how generous is someone to understand, hey, this is a new guy or gal just getting started. That's what's to be expected, because you can't fail if you don't know what you're doing to begin with. That phrase, learn before you earn. So everything that went into that education was a disappointment or a challenge. But without that, you wouldn't know when to pivot. You wouldn't know when to give it up and take on another situation. And some people are forced that you can't stray from the path. Once you stray from the path, even with the best intentions, you're not to be trusted in some organizations. Others are to commend someone and say, yeah, you're almost 80% of the way there, but you missed a point here. If you pick that up and add it to it, you're going to be great. Or just to give people the confidence and hope that I know you got greatness within you. I know that you could be everything you want to be. Let me help you. I think being a friend and not a boss, is so important. Even in parenting, it's the same thing. One day they're going to grow up. You can't discipline them forever. You can't, have them support you in everything. And everybody wants to continue to grow, because that's the investment you make in people, is having them around. And consistency is so important. They say the worst thing you can do is deal with the same situation in two different ways. Right? Someone did something, got commended. Somebody else did the same thing a week later. You weren't in a good mood and you forgot what you just said. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm in limbo here. And because of that, I'm going to hold off. And if you got everybody holding off, you put all that responsibility on the leader. And how many leaders want that? My goal, and it was easy when you own your own company and you don't have to have a boss except for the customer or maybe investors or whatever, is to be generous, because that's what you want to duplicate through others. How you get brought into something is how you bring other people into something. If somebody was miserable and showed you a way you can succeed by being miserable or dishonest, well, you're going to learn that and probably get the approval, and all of a sudden you're going to continue that process. So I think leadership, especially in today's information age, and things move so quickly and they are distorted, even if they're not meant to be, is so important. And that's what I think leaders in countries have to be, is the, bringing up the smallest person brings everybody up, and to be a winner, they say it's lonely at the top. The last thing you want to do is be a winner with a great organization and nobody's with you to celebrate it. Or you took advantage of everybody along the way and you just were a total fraud to most people. So I forgot where we are. I think it's Dave.
Yeah, I want to bring up Charles's comment there. Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are, by Brene Brown. And first I want to say thank you, Charles, for these great quotes, because they are triggering some good thoughts in my head here. And appreciate those. Brene Brown, I think, is one of the greats. She taught me a lot during COVID as I listened to her and read her books. And let me just go back a step to that story I just told about 1999 with that Master Chief. I will be the first to tell you I was probably a little cocky in those days. I was not as authentic as I could have been or should have been. I was a little bit of a brash person myself. Regardless of that, I thought that situation was pretty crappy overall. It just was uncalled for because he didn't like my father 20 years before. But a leader needs to be consistent, and a leader needs to be trusting. A leader needs to show that they are able to do the job themselves well before they can even empower somebody down the line. And that comes through the trust that we build over time. And I think too many times that people are coming into the military, into business, or into a new job within those whatever organization or career paths they're on, thinking, well, I've earned this and I'm here. Give me the money, give me the power, give me the responsibility. But they haven't earned it. Just because you've gotten a new job and you've been to school for a couple of years doesn't mean you know everything or enough even to do something in a different organization, because everybody's different. You could go from, within the military, for Jason and me, we could go from one command to the other, same job. Jason, if I remember, aviation mechanic. Well, they may do something a little bit differently in that organization than the last command. Or, I go from National Security Agency to a field site. Well, one's a higher echelon than the other, but we do things a little differently. But if I think I can do it the same and I just come in with this attitude, then I'm going to be looked upon lesser than I would have been had I come in with an open mind and been open to seeing how things can be done differently, at least giving some time to understand why they do something differently. And I think too many times people come in thinking they know everything and they're ready, but things are different everywhere you go. Culturally, maybe big picture the same, but locally, maybe a little bit different.
Yeah, great points. And I'll get back to Charles's point. Authenticity requires a certain measure of vulnerability, transparency, and integrity. Janet Lewis Stevenson. A leader's effectiveness is determined by their consistency. In leadership, consistency builds trust and credibility. We've got Mark Boss here today. Good event again, gents. I have to go, but thanks again, and hear and see you soon. I'm so happy to have you, Mark. Have a wonderful, empowering day. Oh, and you said the same thing. Maybe I read it earlier without knowing it. Have a wonderful and powerful day. Let's move it to Jason.
Yeah, I think it's so important, a point that's being made, and I want to go back to, Charles was talking about meeting with Clement. And the thing about empowerment is that it has to have a personal touch. What do they say? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If somebody's just throwing you out there, throwing you to the wolves, you might think, and just saying, hey, go do it, and you don't, you might not do as well as you could, but if you have that connection with them, and you don't have to like them, it doesn't have to be your buddy or your friend, but you have to have a feel for that, that they actually care about your growth. They actually care about what you're doing, and they're not just using you as a tool to get something accomplished. I think on both sides, then there's, once again, we go back to the word trust. That develops that trust, and in trust, everyone grows and benefits. And so it's very important how you approach things. And, you know, to Dave's point, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. But if the student's not ready, nothing's gonna change. So if the student goes into it, like to Dave's point about, well, I already know how to do this. If something switches, or I got this, and they're not open to learning, once again, they're not empowered, because they're not going to get the full power of what that person could have shared with them. And so it has to be a two-way conduit between the two people, and both parties have to be open to learning from each other.
Exactly. Charles?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You've got to keep the communication open there and the information flowing. And I think you also have to prioritize transparency. You have to, in addition to communicating regularly, the leader's got to lead by example and model the right behaviors and the right attitude that they expect from others, and demonstrate consistency and commitment to their principles. But at the same time, I think everybody needs to be open to prioritizing transparency on the direction something's going in, or just how or why decisions are being made. And it comes back to what I was talking about earlier, the whole concept around sense checking and validating information up and down and throughout the organization, so that it just makes a lot of sense of what's happening and why things are getting done the way they are. And out of that, people will be empowered, because they'll see that it matters to people that information and decision making is just not all one way, but it's back and forth, as Jason has described.
Yeah, that's so important, because it harkens back to when I was running my businesses, is having an open door that truly was an open door that people could walk through and feel comfortable. You know, one time I had 72 people under one roof working with me, and a lot of how you treat and talk about people is how people adopt their attitude. Just no different if you say, I just went to a great Italian restaurant, it's just the best I ever had. You're going to go in there with that expectation. What was an interesting aspect is, most times when someone leaves your organization, you throw a little party, maybe have a cake. We did that when someone joined the organization, right? Why not have a little cake saying we're celebrating Jones coming into our business, and here's what I know about Joan and feel about her. And you know, you set the stage properly, or the table for that person, versus, hey, I think we got a new person at accounting. Who is it? What is it? And pretty soon the gossip chain starts to work, and somebody might have come against a draft in front of them instead of a tailwind. And I think, you know, you got to do everything you can to say, I tried to do everything I can. And that way it lends itself to say, well, now it's up to you. You know, I positioned you, I'm here for you. You got to come through in order for that to happen, you know. And that's part of what I always called the two-step strategy, which is you take a step and I'll take a step, or I'll take a step and you take a step, but no one's taking two steps, right? Once I do it, you need to do it, or ask for help in doing it. And there's nothing wrong with training wheels for a while. But again, it's someone who says, listen, I like 90% of what you're doing here, 10% I don't have no idea. Right? Why not get that out in front, as opposed to, well, I'll fake it till I make it, or I'll ask people around me. And at a certain point, you got to know who you're dealing with. You know, I know that one of the shoe companies that Amazon bought, they had a chairman who had a strategy that after 90 days, he would offer every new employee $5,000 to leave. And it was because, hey, if you're hanging on like a loose leaf on a tree, better to go before we invest any more time or effort into you. And if it's not for you, let someone else take that position. And at a certain point, you get some account. It was Zappos, actually, was the name of the company. So you learn from others, and you learn from other people's successes. You know, we had Bob Berg here, who was the go-giver, and his whole philosophy was you have to give to get. Sometimes you have to give just to give, and you're not going to get anything, but that's okay, because maybe you hit a dry well once in a while. But the more important thing is being that memory that Dave had, which wasn't that positive, to other people's memories, to go back to, I'm proud that I work with that person, and 10 years later, look at where they are now versus where they started, right? And you can take some credit and some benefit and joy through living vicariously through others, where it's sincere. I really want to help you. I really want you to be successful here. And I also want you to do the best thing you can for you and your family. So when it came time for people to take a better position or a different position, I was happy for them. I wasn't resentful. How could you do that? We put so much time into you. We did so well by you. Well, you started out with you owe me and you'll never be able to pay me attitude. Or as long as you're with us, you're good. When you go against us, it's bad. And I think the other aspect is diversification, having diversity, applauding differences, including different opinions, and not being afraid of positive, constructive criticism. It's one thing to say, I like this, but I want to point this out. And and you could preface it, I may be wrong, but I think it's important to add this as someone decided to get in the line of fire, decided to put themselves in an exposure situation. So with limited time, we'll go one circuit with Dave.
Yeah, I just, and I think empowerment comes down to trust, leadership, trust and leadership, I guess, authenticity and the goal and the aim of where you want to be. And having done the analysis of each of those things to say, what is it that who is it I want to be as a leader? What is it I want to see from my people? And where do I want all of us to go together? And then allowing people to do their thing to get you to that goal. I think I'll just end it there real quick.
Great point. Jason?
I wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about the winner within. When I see clients, I tell them I don't do anything to anybody. I'm just a tour guide. I just help people get to where they're going. And that's the key about empowerment, is that this skill set, not the technical skill set, but what it takes to accomplish these things is already within you. Find someone to light that spark within you, and everyone wins.
Exactly. Charles?
Yeah, I love that. And just hearkening back to something that you said, Don, about the leader or the entrepreneur that gave his staff $5,000 to leave. Sometimes people have to find happiness elsewhere. And I think empowerment and authenticity is having the courage to be able to stand up and say, this is not working for me, and it's important for me to go and find happiness elsewhere. But coming back to our discussion about empowerment, I think it's really important to remember that empowerment begins with believing in our own abilities. And for the leader, that means believing in the potential of the people who are around you. And when leaders uplift their teams and create trust within their teams, they really create an unstoppable force for positive change, regardless of what the organization is. So I'd really encourage people to lift one another up and ignite that courage to chase your dreams and believe in one another's greatness together.
Wonderful. And I see you left a comment. When leaders have an open door policy, they empower their teams to voice concerns and contribute ideas. And I think Jason made the point that you can be friendly without being friends. And I can't tell you how many times I had people who didn't have a plane ticket to go to a family funeral, or didn't have enough money to do something. And I would always open my wallet and do it between me and them, never through the company, because you don't want a bunch of small loans that auditors had to look at. And I always got paid back, but it was a big difference because, $300-400 here or whatever the amount was small compared to the goodwill that they came home and they talked to their wife and kids. We can go to St. Louis now and go there. And some people, not some people, but the majority of most people are one paycheck away from the street.
Mm-hmm.
And you forget that. And why put someone in that position? I mean, if you're paying somebody, let's say $1,000 a week or whatever the number is, what's $500 once a year? and you're going to get it back eventually. Why? Because you may be the only person they know that at 3 a.m. they can call and someone's going to bail them out. And that gives you a benefit that most businesses don't have. It's like, so, be a little different in being a leader and in providing empowerment. Get the whole person, not just the working part of the person, and know you care. And I think with that said, we hit our time frame. I want to thank Jason, Dave, and Charles. Next week, we're going to have Sarah Dawkins back. And she's always a thrill and brings so much to it. And one last comment, the greatest gift a leader can give is the belief in the potential of others. So true. And I think that brings to me the point that empowerment can be so rewarding to yourself. The pride you have and knowing you did something important to somebody. And that's, too many people have opportunities right in front of them and they revert back to old beliefs. Someone will invite you in their house, open up the refrigerator and the wine chest, but you say, hey, I need $20. Well, that's a whole different story, right? Now that's money. And that's where you start to see how big and small someone is by how they react to things. And sometimes if you're strong and confident, you'll allow things to happen before you step in, right? Because you want to see where this is going. Everybody understands typically what people said, but not what they meant. What are they? I'm hearing all this stuff. Where's this going? Why is this happening? And then it's up to you to say, I'm a little confused here. That's how you empower yourself, is you're honest and transparent and say, I don't understand this. Can you help me? Or can you explain it? So it's a two-way street. It's not someone waiting for someone to give you something, and it's not waiting for someone to take something. It's meet in the middle on a continuous basis. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of interesting conversation, and a lot of fun, as always. So thank you, Dave, Jason, and Charles, and look forward to having Charles back anytime. He's got an open seat at the table, and he's more than earned it by his support and wonderful comments that he always brings. So with that, go out and empower yourself today, and for anybody watching the future, keep it empower yourself down the line. Take care.